Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to COD Connected. My name's Garrett Drake, and today we're talking about Marvel's Avengers from Crystal Dynamics, published by Square Enix, launching on September 4th for PS4, Xbox One, PC. Public beta goes live in a few days, and thankfully, courtesy of Square Enix, I was able to go hands-on over the weekend and share my thoughts with you as the public beta goes live. And I'm hoping you see this after you've played the game a bit, because I'm very interested to hear reactions from not only just fans of Marvel and the MCU potentially, but also Destiny fans, because this game is quite derivative of that. Now, on one hand, I believe the systems in Destiny that are very present here make sense for an ensemble superhero game, but none of them have felt all that innovative and have not thrilled me by any means. The game's certainly not bad at all. I've had a fair amount of fun with it, specifically when I play multiplayer, but there's a lot to break down. I'm of course going to talk about the heroes, how they feel to play, the mission types, the leveling system, the environments you traverse, the story, so a lot of layers to discuss, but I'm very interested to hear your thoughts. If you have played the beta at all, please share them down below. I'd love to talk about this, but it's going to be interesting because this game certainly has major potential, but it has not wowed me so far. So first and foremost, I believe I'm one of the few people that are actually discussing this aspect of the game, but I feel like the art style is very uninspired. It does not look bad, don't get me wrong. I'm playing on a PS4 Pro, an upscaled 4K display with beautiful lighting, textures look great, animations are awesome, but I feel like these characters look a little too similar to their MCU counterparts. I know they're not associated in any way, but they look so similar that it's almost kind of jarring to look at them. And I wish Crystal had taken a little more creative liberty in separating this Avengers property from what we've had on screen for the last decade. Because I love the MCU, and I'm thrilled that we have an Avengers game to play, but they're just a little too similar. So watching it on screen, even while I'm playing, it just feels a little less interesting than I feel like it could be. Does not ruin the game for me whatsoever, but that already was a reservation for me going into the beta after all the previews we've seen and the articles that have been written about the game, the delays. Nothing about the game had wowed me going into it, but thankfully there are a couple of aspects that rise above the rest that really give the game the potential I think it has. So the characters. In the beta, you can play as Iron Man, Hulk, Black Widow, Captain America, Thor, Kamala. You play as all of them in the opening mission in San Francisco that I'm sure many of you have seen by now. It's a pretty strong mission. You get, of course, a taste of all their characters and the way they sort of function in their default state without upgrading any of their main abilities. And I think the best news coming out of the beta is that none of the characters are remotely boring to play as. I certainly have preferences for some over others, but more or less I've had a great time with all of them. I mean, it's a ton of fun to fly around as Iron Man. It feels great. It's a lot of fun to fly around as Thor, and I'd say the God of War aspect with his hammer feels nearly as satisfying as that game. If you enjoyed Hulk Ultimate Destruction back in the day as I did, you'll probably enjoy playing as Hulk. He's probably my least favorite of the bunch because while his abilities are certainly powerful and he feels strong and it's fun to destroy things as Hulk, he doesn't feel quite as dynamic as some of the other characters to me, notably like Black Widow, for example. This may come as a surprise, but she's probably my favorite character in the game so far. There's just something so satisfying about having her range, dual-wielding pistols, her grapple hook to traverse these maps that feels very akin to Spider-Man, which we'll talk about in a bit. Her ultimate feels pretty awesome with this bow staff thing she has, and her combos feel good. And she's performed by Laura Bailey, which is really just a cherry on top, so had a ton of fun with Black Widow. Captain America, of course, feels great as well. His combat is similar to Black Widow, but the shield gives him that extra melee ability that works very much like a boomerang, and I'm sure there's going to be a lot of cool upgrades for his character throughout the game. And Kamala was honestly a big surprise for me. I know many people have made the joke online that she sort of is like a discount Mr. Fantastic, but I knew very little about Kamala going in. I still don't know much, but I've gotten an idea of her character in this game, which I think is a pretty cool take, because she very much serves as sort of the conduit for the player in many ways. I mean, if I were in her shoes, I'd probably have the same reaction she does in the story, where when she meets up with the Avengers, she's a total fangirl. And I don't want to spoil it because you may actually be interested in the story they're presenting at the very beginning of the game, but the way they set it up, it gives her a reason to seek out the Avengers and bring them back together after a tumultuous event occurs. It may have already been out there, I don't know, but it wasn't spoiled for me, so it was kind of a surprise as to what happens in the beginning. But she's very much stoked to be a part of the Avengers, and in all honesty, I'd probably have the exact same reaction. And some people may find her personality kind of annoying, but I thought it was pretty endearing, so her personality is a lot of fun, and she's a surprising amount of fun to play as well. Specifically with the way she traverses the map, her stretchy arms, it's kind of funny, but she'll stretch her arms out and sort of swing, similar to Black Widow would with her grapple hook or Spider-Man with his webs. Many of her combat abilities are fun too, especially when she becomes a giant and just starts flailing her arms around. And thankfully, overall, combat feels pretty good. It doesn't feel amazing. It's certainly not as fluid as, say, something like Spider-Man on PS4 or even many third-person action brawlers we have out there, but it functions. You can lock on to enemies, so attacking enemies with whether it's a quick attack or a heavy attack or a special ability feels pretty good. It just doesn't feel very fluid, which isn't that big of a deal. I think it functions as well as it needs to for this type of experience. But so far it has begun to feel a little mindless for me. I think I've roughly played 10 hours or so. And while on one hand you can mix and match your multiple abilities that require specific button combinations or power-ups to complete them, you are mostly just mindlessly punching things over and over and over again. And it's odd because in Destiny, for example, you have to actively aim and fire at these enemies, whereas in this game you can simply lock onto them and just button mash square or triangle over and over and over again to take them down. But doing that over a period of roughly 10 hours has become a little stale for me. But thankfully there is a healthy amount of mission variety, some of which are stronger than others. Of course you have campaign missions, war zones, which are probably my favorite, I'll get to those, harm challenges, and drop zones. So probably the least interesting of the bunch are the drop zones. They're roughly 5 to 10 minute experiences that have you drop into a match, either destroy something or defend something and just fight pockets of enemies along the way. I think that's what's lacking from these missions, is that there isn't a powerful enemy at the end, say like a mini boss or just some sort of combat challenge that I feel like would really tie together the experience, because it's kind of jarring. You drop in, fight some enemies, complete your objective, and it just ends instantly. It just feels very anticlimactic. They are bite-sized and perfect for small amounts of time you may have to play, whether you're playing before you go to work or before you go to school. Campaign missions so far have been pretty fun. There's only a handful in the beta, but the dialogue between characters, the animations and cutscenes as they tell this story have certainly been engaging, and I'm actually very interested to see how the story plays out. But the campaign missions have a little more meat to them. There's a bunch of traversal opportunities like platforming and stuff throughout the missions, plenty of resources to collect, and dialogue and banter throughout that really draw you into the story a bit more. So those have functioned more or less like every other mission in the game, but they feel a little more substantial with the characters interacting with each other along the way. Harm missions are simply simulated challenges on the helicarrier that enable you to select any character you like and test out all of your unlocked abilities and test out new gear and really get a feel for the characters prior to bringing them into specific missions. War zones are definitely my favorite, and I believe it's where the game currently shines, and I feel like it also reveals where the most potential for the game lies. And they're especially enjoyable when you play with real players. So they're very akin to strikes in Destiny. You're on the Quinjet, you drop into a map, you fight tons of enemies along the way, multiple objectives to complete without. Of course, there's a ton of collectibles and chests to find. And at the very end, there's one big bombastic boss you got to take down as a team, which I love because not only do you have to communicate to effectively fight the boss, but combining your abilities with all of your friends or the people you're playing with really bring the magic of the game to life, I feel. And playing by myself is fine. I definitely got bored after a while because while you have CPU players with you at all times, it comes more to life when you're playing with real players. And I had a ton of fun fighting this gigantic spider boss at the end of the war zone in the beta, which ironically is also very similar to Destiny, but it's cool. It simply says kill the thing, and it has multiple places where you can attack it and multiple scenarios and phases of the boss fight. And if you're leveled up appropriately, it's pretty simple to bring it down. And what war zones have revealed to me most is that the game has tremendous potential in this regard. So just imagine a giant raid, again, similar to Destiny or World of Warcraft, whatever you want to compare it to. Go down this big mission path where you fight multiple bosses, of course, tons of enemies, and at the end of the raid, you could fight Thanos or Ultron. I think that would be so much fun, especially as the game grows over time. Let's say you have the X-Men to choose from, Fantastic Four, all the Avengers we currently have. Who knows who they could add to the game and the bosses and story arcs they could add to the game. But I feel like where the game's beginning, it can only go up from here, and I'm hoping we see something like that come to the game over time. Another aspect that I greatly appreciate is that each character levels up separately, because no two players can play as the same character at the same time. So your Iron Man, Black Widow, your Hulk, your Thor all level up differently. So I believe ultimately that gives you a very strong reason to have a more dynamic, engaging experience, because you're not necessarily forced to play as other characters, but if you want to be able to jump into quick matches or team up with your friends and switch up who's playing as who, it gives you all the more reason to play as each character along the way. And leveling the characters is pretty straightforward. So you have your overall hero level and you have your power level that's determined by all the gear you equip. And gear is acquired by defeating enemies, defeating bosses, finding it in chests and missions. You equip all your most powerful gear, that determines your power level, and you can boost that gear by applying all the resources you've collected. So if you're not finding gear, you're finding resources that have all these different categories that you apply to that gear to boost your power level, to give you that extra edge in combat and missions that you go into. Your overall hero level upgrades over time. That grants you skill points that you invest in your abilities. And in the beta, I must say that the abilities I unlocked for every character didn't make it all that more interesting. Granted, it's one of 3 pages that are available in the full game, but the first page for each character, while yes, they add new abilities, none of them really spruce up the combat all that much. So I'm eager to see what the additional abilities look like and if they really make your base level default style character feel entirely different from a max level character. In a game like this, that's absolutely necessary. I imagine Crystal's put in the work to make that a reality, so I can only hope that's the case, but in the beta, the abilities you can unlock aren't all that interesting. And one thing I was unaware of going into the beta is that your cosmetic appearance differs from the gear you wear. So your gear does not determine the way you look. Thankfully, there are several skins you can unlock for your characters through gameplay, and you can wear whatever you want. If you want to be classic Iron Man, space Iron Man, or classic Black Widow, or have Kamala wear like a fan t-shirt of Iron Man or something, that does not determine your power level whatsoever. So that's something I also really appreciate, is that you can look however you want and also play however you want, and they're just completely separate from one another. So there are a few other negative aspects of the beta. Notably, the required Square Enix account to gain access to multiplayer with friends, new hero releases, future story and world expansions, access to interviews, blogs, giveaways, and more, and you must be registered to view quote-unquote exclusive content. And that bums me out because it really just delays the player. It delayed me getting into the beta. You have to go online, sign up, you have to confirm your email, and then confirm it in the game, and it just does nothing but slow down the experience. I understand why they tie some of it behind a Square Enix account, but it just reminds me of stuff Uplay has done in the past. It reminds me of stuff that 2K has done with some of their sports games. I don't really feel like it adds much to the experience. I'd much rather all that content just be in the game. You can access it through separate menus, but having to actually sign up for a Square Enix account just slows down the experience, which really bummed me out jumping into it. And to be expected in the beta, there are a couple of weird glitches. Thankfully, there's a 4K mode and there's a performance mode. Performance mode on PS4 Pro will get you pretty close to 60 FPS, but even so, in performance mode, when clusters of enemies just gang up on you, it still tends to drop a significant amount of frames. I mean, I was sludging through some of these missions, not always, but more times than not, these missions would slow down pretty significantly, even in performance mode when enemies gang up on one another. There have also been a couple funny glitches. At one point, Hulk was just one of those stoic character models just floating around the map with no animations, but of course everything's being destroyed around him and he's yelling and screaming, but he's just not moving. So a couple of glitches there. Kamala's run in slow motion for me a few times as I'm traversing these maps, while everything else frame rate wise is solid. She's running in slow motion. So little kinks here and there, which are to be expected. I mean, the game doesn't launch until September 4th, and I imagine the beta not only is just to see how the game functions on all their respective platforms, but of course work out the kinks along the way. Another aspect that doesn't destroy the game, but certainly slows down the experience, is the UI is pretty slow and unresponsive. I'm sure that's another thing they need to polish before the game releases, but traversing menus and going in and out of your ability menu or your cosmetics or your challenge window, all of them are just kind of slow jumping in between each one. So to sum things up, overall, it's pretty cool. Again, this is just my subjective opinion. Like I said, on one hand, it's cool that we have an Avengers video game. I like that we can team up with friends. It's very derivative of Destiny, but I feel like those systems, for the most part, function here. Overall, it doesn't necessarily feel innovative in any way, but we'll have to wait and see. I will be reviewing the game for COD Connected. I'll play the game in its entirety, and of course, closer to release, you'll hear our thoughts on the full version of the game. But I'm very interested to hear everyone's thoughts, not only around the industry, but specifically those of you who are watching this video. If you played the beta, please share your thoughts in the comments below. I always respond to comments, whether you love it, hate it, you're kind of in the middle where I'm at. I think we could have some interesting discussions about it. I'm mostly excited to see how the full game plays out. And all the footage you've seen in this video is actually B-roll provided by Square Enix, and we can actually put out our own gameplay later in the week, so keep an eye out for that if you want to see some combat highlight videos, full missions, and a cosmetics video I put together that shows all the costumes you can acquire in the beta itself. But once again, this is COD Connected. My name is Garrett Drake. If you enjoyed the video, please give it a thumbs up, subscribe for all things gaming, and for news, reviews, features, and more, visit us at codconnected.com.